Third-party login providers are often referred to as social logins because they allow users to sign into your app using existing accounts from popular services like Google, Facebook, Twitter, GitHub, etc. The third-party login providers are really important because, first of all, they do enhance the user experience. With the third-party providers, users don't need to create and memorize yet another username and password. They can just use their existing social media account. This also means that the sign-up process becomes really quick, often requiring just a couple of clicks. Next, with the third-party providers, you also increase the conversion because users that already have a social media profile, they can just sign up using that profile. So this can lead to basically higher conversion rates for your app. And last but not least, you do also improve the security because the reputable third-party providers do invest heavily in security. So this means that by delegating authentication to them, you often inherit improved security practices compared to rolling out your own system from scratch. And here the first thing that we need to do is that we need to just go to the program.cs, so Solution Explorer, and then go to program.cs. And then here I'll just scroll down. After the auto member configuration, I'm just going to type builder.services and then .add authentication. Now, by using the add authentication, after this method, we're going to use different methods to add different third-party providers. We're going to start with Google. So for that, I'll just type in here add Google. And here we see that we get an error, and that's right, because for us to be able to use this extension method, we need to install an additional NuGet package. So I'll just go to Solution Explorer, and then in here, I'll just right click to the dependencies. I'll click here, Manage NuGet Packages, and then in here, I'm going to search for Authentication Google. The first option is the Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.Authentication.Google. And the description here says that ASP.NET Core contains middleware to support Google's OpenID and Auth 2.0 authentication workflow. This is the package we want to install. Now, just to make sure, I'm going to install the 8.0.1, but you can also install the latest version. And then I'll click Install. I'll accept the license. Now that this package is installed, I'll just go back to program.cs. And then in here, now you can see that the error is gone. Now, as parameter to this method, we are going to provide two parameters. The first one is going to be the Google Client ID, and the second one is going to be the Google Client Secret. So for that, in here, I'll just type options and then client ID. We are going to load this value from the appsettings.json file, but for now, I'll just leave it empty. And then down here, options dot the client secret, I'm going to leave this empty as well. Let us also add a semicolon here. And for now, this is all you need to do in here in the program.cs. Now let us just go and update the login page. So then in or just below the username and password, we also see the third-party providers. Now there are two ways. The first way is by injecting the service in the view. The second one is by updating the ViewModel and passing as an additional parameter the list of all the third-party providers. We are going to follow the second one because that is the suggested way. It's not a good practice to inject services in the view. So I'll just go to Solution Explorer, and then I'll just go to Data, View Models, then Login VM. And in the Login VM, I'm going to create another property. This is going to be basically for third-party login providers. I'll just type in your public and then list. Authentication scheme is going to be the type. Authentication scheme. And I'll just name it maybe just external logins or maybe schemes. I'll just name it schemes and then get set. Now let us go to the login VM or wherever the login VM is used, and that is in the Solution Explorer, Authentication Controller. Just scroll down in here. In the login, when we construct the login VM, I just type in here var login VM is equal to new login VM. we're just going to set the value in here for the schemes. And to get the schemes, we're just going to use the sign-in manager. For that, await, and then sign-in manager dot get external authentication schemes async. But this one does return an IEnumerable. In here, we are setting a list. There are two ways to fix this issue. The first one is by just going here and changing this from list to IEnumerable. And then if you just go back, you can see the error is gone. The second option is by just converting this one to a list by using the toList method. I'm just going to leave it as IEnumerable, and I'm just going to add a semicolon in here, and then pass as a parameter the login VM. Now let us go to the view, and then in here I'll just go to the views, and then to login.c#html. In here, inside this div, I'm going to add another row. I'm just going to collapse this one. I'm going to add another div, which does have the class row. And then I want to also add some padding to the top. So pt2, I want to add 2. Then I'm just going to actually copy this part, scroll down, close the div. And then inside here, I'm going to have an h5 tag. It's going to be external login. And then I'm going to use an if condition to see if we have any third-party providers configured in here. So in here, at if, so if the model.schemes and then .count. So if the count is equal to 0, then I just want to display in here, for example, a div with a message. Let's say just no external login providers have been configured. Otherwise, else in here, I want to use a form, and then this form is going to just have an ASP action of external login, which is going to be an action that we call whenever someone clicks on one of the buttons. And then inside a div, I'm just going to add, or I'm just going to use a for each loop, and I'll just type var provider in the model.schemes. And then inside here, I'm going to create a button. And this button is going to have, of course, the type submit. I'll also assign a class, which is going to be, let's say, btn, and then btn primary, which is a bootstrap class. And then the name, say, is going to be the provider. And the value is going to be the provider dot name. Then if you want, let me just bring them down here. To the bottom, we can also add a title, or like a tooltip, which can be, say, login using your, and then provider.name, account, and then down here, we're just going to use the provider.displayName. So basically this part in here, based on what we have configured on program.cs, we're going to get Google, GitHub, if you want to add Facebook, Twitter, etc. For now, we're just going to get Google. Now I'm just going to save all the changes, and then I'm just going to start the app. In here, we get an error which says that the client ID must be provided. I'll just close the browser, then go to program.cs. Just going to add in here A, B, C, D, and then down here as well. Save the changes, run the app one more time. So these are just dummy values that we are going to replace with the correct ones. Now we can see that the app is running. And now if you go to the login, here below, you see external login and then Google. Now you can also see the tooltip, which says that login using your Google account. If you click it for now, and here you get an error which says that this localhost page cannot be found. And that's right, because we have not created this action yet. In the login.c#html, when we define the button, we have also defined a name like provider. And then for the name, we have also defined a value provider.name. What this means is that whenever you click the submit button, and then you want the call, or the call is sent to the external login action, what this means is that this action is also going to take as a parameter the name provider. So let us go and create this action. I'm just going to copy this value. And then here I'll just scroll down to the end, to the bottom. Just going to create another action. Public action result, external login. It's going to take a parameter provider. And then optionally, we can also set a return URL. So basically you go to a page where you are not authenticated, then we trigger authentication. And after the authentication is successful, you want to redirect yourself to the same page. Now down here, we are going to define the redirect URL. So var redirect URL. And this is going to be basically the URL that we want to redirect the user after the login process was successful. And to create the URL, you just need to use url.action. And then in here, you just define the action or the action result that is going to be, let's say, external login. You can either name this external login success or better just callback. And this is going to be in the controller authentication. And then optionally, you can also define the return URL. And we said that if you want to pass parameters, you just use new and then return URL is equal to the return URL. Now down here, we need to also define the login properties. So var properties is equal to, for that, we're going to use the sign-in manager. And then the method that needs to be used in here is configure external authentication properties. This takes two parameters. The first one is provider, because based on the provider, it's going to configure the authentication properties. And the second one is the redirect URL. Now here, what we need to do, we need to be able to trigger the Google login pop-up or the Facebook, Twitter, or whatever provider you use. And to trigger that pop-up, what you need to do is you just need to return new challenge result. And that just passes a parameter, the provider, and the properties. This is all you need to do. Let us also define the external login callback. Just going to define it in here. Public, let's say async, and then task by action result. And the name is this one, external login callback. This is going to take two parameters. The first one is going to be the return URL, which is going to be just optional. And also string remote error, which is another property. Now inside here for now, we're not going to define any code, but we are just going to return a view. So just return view, just so the error is gone. But I'm going to put a breakpoint just so I know that the whole external login setup worked as expected. Now this is what you need to do on the C# side or on the ASP.NET MVC side. We need now to go create a Google app, and then from that app, we need to get the client ID and the client secret. To get these values, you need to navigate to cloud.google.com. And then in here, you can either click the go to console or just the console button here at the top right. So go to console. And then from the drop down, select the drop down and then click the new project. In the new project, I'll just define a name, let's say shortly app, and then create. Now that the app was created, I'm just going to select the project. And you can see from the drop down that the project was selected. And I'll just go to APIs and services. And then in here, I'll just go to credentials. And in here, I'm just going to create credentials. And then from the options, I'll select Auth client ID. And here, I'm just going to configure the consent screen. The user type is going to be external and then create. Let us define an application name, which is going to be, let's say, shortly app. And here on the right, you have these placeholders, which says that the shortly app wants to access your Google account, because from the users that want to access our app using Google, we want to be able to get their Gmail account. So then we can store it in our database. As support email, I'm going to set my Gmail account. And you can ignore the other properties. Then just use the same email address in here and click save and continue. You can ignore the scopes part, just save and continue. test users, continue. And on here, you can just go back to the dashboard. Now let us go to credentials and let us go and click the credentials again. The app type is going to be a web application. The name is going to be shortly app. We want to add in here the authorized redirect URIs, and in here basically just need to define the local host where the app is running. You can see that the app is running on localhost and then the port is 7124. Just going to copy this value and then I'm going to use the value in here. But at the end, we need to add sign in and then Google. Then click create. Once the app is created, you can see here that you have the client ID and the client secrets. And these are the two values that we need to use in the appsettings.json file. So I'm just going to copy the client ID. I'll just go to the appsettings.json file. And then in here, I'm just going to create another section. Let's say auth. And then here we are going to have Google. And then inside Google, we are going to have client ID. It's going to be this value. And let us go and get the other value, which is going to be the client secret. I'll click OK. So the second value is going to be client secret. Now let us save the changes. Let us just go to program.cs. And if you scroll up in here, you can see that we are already using the builder.configuration. Just going to copy this value. Scroll down. For the client ID, we are going to have a builder.configuration. And then we are going to have auth Google client ID. And the second value is going to be auth Google client secret. Now let us save the changes and let us run the app to see if everything is going to work as expected. Now, if we just go to login, click on Google, you can see that we get the login screen. Just going to type my email address and next. This is just a security measurement. I'm just going to enter the password. I've also enabled the two-factor authentication. So I'm going to confirm this on my phone. And you can see that now that I confirmed it, I'm getting this sign in to the shortly app. So continue. And I reached the breakpoint, which means that the login was successful. But now we need to get the user email and we need to update our database with that information. Now the last step in the Google login is going to be to get the information of the user from Google. The information includes like the user email address. Then we are going to check if this email is already in our database. And if the information is there, then we just want to log in the user. If not, we want to add this information to the database. So next time when the user tries to log in, we can automatically log them in. So for that, in here in the external login callback, the first thing that we're going to do is that we're going to first check if we have any errors. So if this remote error has any values or not. So for that, in here, I'm just going to type if remote error is different from null. Then we're just going to add some errors to the model state. So model state dot add model error. And then in here, just empty. And then we can just type error from external login provider and then display the error. If not, we want to first get the login information. And then in here, I'm just going to type var info is equal to, and then we're going to use await sign in manager dot get external login info async. Then down here, we are going to check if we have any info or not from Google. So if the information is null, then we want to add another model state error. I'm just going to copy this line, copy in here, and then just return the view login. And then of course in here, we need to also pass as a parameter the login VM, which would also have actually the login or the third-party login providers. So I'm just going to define it in here. Var login VM is equal to new login VM. And let us scroll up. I'm just going to copy some code. Just go to login. Scroll up some more. I want to get these parts. I'm just going to actually copy this whole section. Scroll down. Paste it in here. And then if we have a remote error, we want to return the view login with the login VM. And then down here, I want to return the same view. Now, if we have the info, let us just try to log in the user. So sign in result is equal to await sign in manager dot external login sign in async. As a parameter, we need to first pass the login provider. So info.login provider. The second parameter is going to be the provider key. So info.provider key. The third parameter is going to be is persistent, that I'll just set it to false. And then if there is a two-factor authentication, that I'll just bypass it as well as by using the bypass two-factor true. Now let us check the result. If the sign-in result has succeeded, we just want to return the user by redirect to action. And then I'll just redirect the user to, let's say, index and then home. Otherwise, we are just going to create a new user. The first thing that we need to do is that we need to really get the email from the user. For that, our user email is equal to the info.principal.findFirstValue. We're going to find the email from the claims. So claim types dot email. If we find an email, so if user email is different from null, or maybe is different from, so string is null or empty, then inside here, let us check it in the database. Let's add another check. So for that, I'm just going to type in here. One moment. We need an extra parenthesis. Okay. Var user is equal to await and then user manager dot find by email async. We're going to use the user email from here. And if the user is null, then we just want to create a new user. So var new user is equal to new app user. And then in here, we want to define data like the username is going to be the user email. The email is going to be the user email. And if you want, you can also define other properties like the full name, let's say is confirmed. So email confirmed is equal to true because it's coming from Google. So of course it's confirmed. And then down here, I'm just going to use await, then user manager dot create async. And this is going to create the user. Now we can also assign this user to the simple user role. So for that, await, then user manager dot add to role async. We're just going to add this user to the roles dot a simple user. And then at the end, after everything has worked as expected, we just want to return to redirect to action index home. And if you want, before you return the user, you can also log the user in by using await, then sign in manager dot sign in async, pass as a parameter the user, and then is persistent false. But this one wouldn't work if you, for example, create the new user. So what we can do is that we can just remove the new user, because if you check the user in here, it has the type app user, and just assign the user in here. And then one last thing that we need to do is I'm just going to copy these two lines, just going to paste them down here. And the error is going to be something went wrong. Now let us save the changes. And to see how everything works, I'm just going to leave the breakpoints in here, or I'm actually going to just bring it, let's say here to the info and run the app. In here, let us go to login and then Google. Now in here, let us provide the credentials. We can see that we reached the breakpoint. Just going to continue. We see that we get an error, so that I'll just go back to Visual Studio. And I'm actually going to change the condition here if it's different from string, is null or empty. So only then I want this to be true. Because it's different from null, because empty string is not null. So that's why it's true, and then it comes and executes this section. I'm just going to save the changes. And now you can see we reached the breakpoint. If I continue, we get info. We can see we get Google is authenticated is true. We have the name, and we also have 5 claims. And part of the claims, of course, is the email address. Like we can see in here, name. We have the name identifier, which is the Google ID. We have the given name, the surname, and also the email address. So let us continue. Let us check the sign-in result. It's going to be false. So I'll just go to else. It's going to get the email. It's going to check in our database. We don't have a user. So this is now just going to create a new user. It's going to add the user to the role. And then it's going to log in the user. Let's just continue. And as you can see, everything worked as expected.